After the Spanish Grand Prix, let's go through and rate each and every one of the drivers, how they got on over the weekend. Let's start right at the front. Number 1, Max Verstappen. He had a good qualifying session. I thought he'd absolutely blitzpole, didn't I? Especially considering this should have been a track where Red Bull absolutely dominating their car comes to the forefront. It was anything but that, was it? And even throughout the race, Max Verstappen really had to make the moves. The start was crucial, the pass on Russell was crucial, and all these small things meant he held on, I suppose, to an extent, wasn't it, for the win. But I think it was an absolutely fantastic lap. He made all the right moves at the right time, much like Canada. That crucial point where Norris was charging down, he made that 4 or 5 laps where he just halted that charge of Norris and meant he got home with the win. It was another brilliant show from Max Verstappen of why he's multiple world champion and so highly rated in the field. He gets a lot of this. He's got the best car, and yes, he's had that, but over the last couple of Grand Prix, he definitely hasn't had the fastest car, and he's won, and that's a true champion. A 10 out of 10 for me. It was an absolutely fantastic, dominant performance. Did the job when it counted. Second place, Lando Norris, and a fantastic qualifying lap, didn't he? Pulled it out of the bag. I don't think they had the 1 lap pace as the Red Bull, and I think that's why it was so good, especially in qualifying. It looked like when Max was just turned up a bit, he was 2 or 3 tenths faster than everyone else, and we'd not really seen that up until that point. And from there onwards, it just looked like Verstappen would take it, but Norris pulled off an incredible lap. I mean, it was so close to Max, and that's the way it was all race as well, wasn't it? And it was the small things for Lando Norris that cost him in the race. The poor start was the big one, and I think it was losing out to George Russell more than just slipping behind Max Verstappen, because if it was just Max, I think they would have been toe to toe throughout that race. The pair of them looked really a class apart from the rest of the field in many ways come race trim, and so it proved in the end, and it was just that small mistake really that cost Lando Norris the win. He won driver of the day, and he got the fastest lap. I think it was just the underdog really in some ways on that late charge, but he gave himself a little bit too much to do, and not really the underdog. I think they had the fastest car in the race for large parts of it, and just the small mistakes really cost him, and he was disappointed in the end. But I've given him a 10 out of 10 because I think overall it was a fantastic weekend for him. Third place, Lewis Hamilton, back on the podium after an absolute age. Qualifying, he was first time he's out-qualified his teammate all season. He actually looked really on it as well, didn't he? Looked close to potentially second, third. In the race though, they didn't quite have the pace to keep back Norris and Verstappen. I think they would have finished closer to them than they did, about 8 or 9 seconds back in the end, but I think they would have finished closer than they did. Lewis got a really horrible start, and then the strategy worked really well for him to go softs in the end. That Russell hards really cost him, and Lewis took full advantage of that and back on the podium after, like I said, absolute long time. A brilliant performance all round for him this weekend. I've gone for a 9 out of 10 for Lewis Hamilton. George Russell in 4th place. He started 4th, finished 4th in the end. He got an absolutely tremendous start up into the 1st place, 3 places up onto turn 1. It was absolutely brilliantly timed that to perfection. But we knew that once Max closed and he made that decisive early pass, that Mercedes were never really going to be in the fight for the win, because at that point they had clear air track position and they could really make it stick. It would have been at that point, but Max did what he did, and then from there Russell had a good race, didn't he? Probably the right strategy up until they went for the hards, and I'm surprised they went for the hards and it was an earlier stop. I think they pitted earlier than the rest, didn't they? Both him and Carlos Sainz, and that's what made them go for that hard tyre, I think, just considering how far they had to go in that stint, because he was getting closed down by Lewis, and to avoid that fight probably at that stage Mercedes thought, let's get him on a strategy that thought would do well. It wasn't anyone that went on the hards. It was the wrong choice in the end. But overall, a decent weekend. He did well to hold off Leclerc in the end. A 7 out of 10 for me. 5th place, Charles Leclerc. Started there, finished there. Ferrari are disappointing in the end, weren't they? Went soft. Carlos Sainz let him past. Them two had a battle at the beginning, didn't they? Carlos Sainz got ahead of Charles Leclerc. But for the Sainz error on going hards, I think Leclerc would have finished behind him. Sainz let him pass to close down George Russell in the end. Didn't have enough in it in the end, but yeah, a disappointing weekend overall. I've gone for a 6 out of 10 for Charles Leclerc. Carlos Sainz in 6th, finished 6th, started there, finished there. Like I said, he was ahead of Charles Leclerc at the beginning, and he was feisty. Good battle with Charles, and then a decent battle with Lewis Hamilton. That Ferrari was disappointing for him as well. The hard tyre strategy was disappointing. A 5 out of 10 overall in the end for Carlos Sainz. 7th place, Oscar Piastri in his weekend really got off to a bad start after that poor qualifying 10th. The car should have been much higher up, and had he done that, I think he would have been better in the race. Made up a couple of places. But yeah, decent points, but you should have really qualified better to be fighting for the podium place, and I think he could have done that considering how good that McLaren was there this weekend. So I've gone for a 6 out of 10 for him. 8th place, Sergio Perez, another one, poor qualifying. He had that 3rd place grid penalty, which meant he started 11th. Finished 8th in the end. Had a bit of a battle with the Alpines, didn't he? But at one point he was 3/10 slower than Gasly and lapping 8/10 slower than the leader Max Verstappen. He was way off the pace, and he really needs something to prove why Red Bull have given this contract for another couple of years, because at the moment he's done anything but since handing that. He's not really gained any confidence, and he's like last year where the early form was good, he's lost that and it's just struggling to find a way back, isn't he? I think it was a poor performance from him overall given the car that he's had. And a 2 out of 10 for me. 9th place, Pierre Gasly back in the points. He was started 7th, so a really good qualifying session for him. Was comfortable in the race, didn't really have any pressure from behind, wasn't fast enough to put pressures on the Ferraris, couldn't hold off Piastri and Perez in the end because he was ahead of them for large parts of the race. The tyres just worn out on his car, probably the slightly wrong strategy, so I don't think he would have got 7th, but he could potentially held on for 8th. But 9th place, good points for Alpine, he'll be very happy with that. And I've gone for a 7 out of 10 for Pierre Gasly. Behind him, his teammate Ocon. He had a difficult race, didn't he? Came on the radio asking if there was any damage on his car because he was really struggling with sliding on that car. He was about 3/10 slower than Gasly for most of the race. He wasn't really putting any pressure on him, but a decent held on, just kept back Kevin Magnussen in the end. He was lucky, obviously. Magnussen got a 5-second penalty because he was only about 2 seconds behind him at one point, and I think it's difficult, but Ocon, be happy. Double points finish for Alpine. I've gone for a 7 out of 10 for him as well. 11th place, Nico Hülkenberg, and I think he drove a really good race. 13th place start, made up a couple of places. He was battling with Ocon. That 5-second penalty for speeding in the pit lane didn't help. I think that he just he knew he wasn't going to make up 5 or 6 seconds on passing Ocon and then making that up gap, so maybe he let off a little bit in the end, but a really strong showing from him. He's wiped the floor with his teammate this weekend, and I think without that penalty he might have had that extra push and charge in him to pick up some points. But I've gone for a 7 out of 10 for me for this weekend. 12th place, Fernando Alonso, and he had a really poor start. Lost 2 places at the beginning, and I think he got a bit of a shunt, and then he went through a period of just being slow, didn't he? Dropped down to 14th place. The car was struggling early on. Picks up some places in the end, finished 12th in his home race, but overall it was a bit disappointing from the Aston Martin, weren't they? They were in the points last weekend, and here the car just struggled around all round everywhere. There wasn't a point in the race where they looked strong or solid, really. A 5 out of 10 for me. 13th place finish for Zhou Guanyu. In the end, a decent result actually. Started 15th, made up a couple of places. A poor start, lost 2 places, back to P17. The car looked decent in certain parts of the races, didn't they? Looked a bit racy, but there was never really any chance of points. But beats his teammate, which is a good result for him. I've given him a 7 out of 10. 14th place, Lance Stroll. Yeah, no real impression on the race. Drove, yeah, disappointed to be probably beaten by a Sauber, beaten by his teammate also. That's kind of, well, he's beaten him over the last couple of weekends, so we've got the real Stroll back, I suppose, haven't we? Yeah, overall disappointing. I'm going to go for a 4 out of 10 for me. It wasn't a great race from him. 15th place, Daniel Ricciardo. 18th place start. The Red Bull or Racing Bull really struggled, didn't it, here this weekend? It was new upgrades coming, so there was a lot of enthusiasm around that, but it didn't really quite show in the race. Comfortably beat his teammate Yuki Tsunoda, which he's not done of late, and the car just wasn't good around here at all. I've given him a 6 out of 10. 16th place for Valtteri Bottas. Started 12th, finished 16th, lost 4 places in the end. He got 2 places dropped at the start. He was down to 14th and then just struggled from there onwards. I think at the end the tyres just didn't have enough, and the car just wasn't good around here. A 4 out of 10 for me. 17th place finish for Kevin Magnussen, and he had a horrible race overall, didn't he? Just no pace in that car. He got a 5-second penalty for a false start, and to finish so far down behind his teammate was disappointing. A 3 out of 10 for me for him. 18th place is Alex Albon, and the Williams was really struggling. He started from the pit lane, did well actually, because he was up at P14 at one point, and I don't think they were ever really in the fight for points in that car. In the end, made a mistake and then cost him a couple of places, but they were never really in the hunt for points here. A 5 out of 10 for me. 19th place is Yuki Tsunoda, another one with a horrible race weekend. He had a good start though, and then got a 5-second penalty. Just a race to forget in the end. He had a 3 stops to go on the hard and make an impression on the race. Didn't really pull anything off from there. A 3 out of 10. And last place, Logan Sargent. Ran last throughout the whole race, didn't really do anything, and it's just a matter of time now, I think, before Williams announce a replacement. Is 2 laps down, the only guy to get lapped twice by Max. It was a horrible weekend overall, a 1 out of 10. And there we have it. That's the driver ratings done. Onto the predictions review. Well, for pole position, I had Max Verstappen, and Lando Norris stole that one, so I got that one wrong there. Verstappen in second. I had Carlos Sainz to take second, and Lewis Hamilton in third, which he did, so got one right on there. A race, I went for a Max Verstappen victory, which was good, and then I had the 2 Ferraris after that, and they had a stinker, didn't they? Norris came second, Hamilton third. Completely wrong on that one. I thought it'd be a good race for Ferrari, a 2-3, and it was the absolute opposite, wasn't it? They've been beaten by a Red Bull. They're now behind the McLarens and the Mercedes, which is strange. They look like the ones taking the fight to Red Bull, and closer to McLaren than they have been. But yeah, McLaren had a really good race weekend, I think, with Lando Norris, and he's the one that I thought they would struggle here. Obviously, my predictions have been all wrong. Yeah, it wasn't a bad race weekend for McLaren at all. I think Ferrari stole that. I suppose you can say that with Piastri a little bit, but yeah, that's the way it goes sometimes. But yeah, off to Austria next. It should be a fantastic racing weekend. It looks so close up at the front. It's very hard to predict of who's going to do what. Yeah, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe and comment as always, and I'll see you for the next video.